Hello and welcome to the review. My name's Tara Newton-Wordsworth and today we're talking to Poet Timi Olotu. We're going to be talking about what poetry is. Timmy, thank you so much for joining us. If you could just define for us initially what you believe a poem to be.
Thank you, Tara. It's nice to be here. I think a poem for me is any piece of writing that takes familiar objects or experiences and puts them in a context where they become unfamiliar, where they become, something special more than what we perceive them to be.
Beautifully put. What kind of objects would you say you take and make them extraordinary through poetry?
Personally, I'm very influenced by the just the connectedness of nature with humanity, like the human race. I think often when we encounter it, we see it in terms of a disconnect, humans ravaging nature. But I think there's a lot of congruity between the way nature works and the way we live. So I like to take natural phenomena and use them as a kind of basis, a metaphor, or any other device on which I base my poetry. So I'll say nature, basically.
So we're going to hear Timmy's poem. Sometimes I notice you're there all the time.
Sometimes I notice you're there all the time. I think about how the gin has left me at the mercy of the night bus. The kissing couples, crimping cuddles, pout-faced selfies, trout-faced uglies, garish giggles blunted to wispy whispers. Thank you, gin. I think about how the haze might make me forget all the things I should remember. Someone giving me the eye, a beauty up for killing free time. Someone giving me the eye, a loony up for skinning me life. I drown in the fog, lost in Lethe, looking for questions like, who am I? Where am I? What happened to my shoes? I think about not thinking about her, out of reach but everywhere, like the ubiquitous skies against which my world is set. And there it is.
I love that poem. I just think it's such a beautiful blend of enormous depth, but then also humour. It just always makes me laugh, the part about the shoes, because it's kind of like these exceptionally deep questions like, who am I? Where am I? What happened to my shoes? But yeah, I mean, you really mix kind of comedy and not tragedy, but like that blend of drama and comedy so nicely. Has that sort of been something that you've developed over time, or how did you start writing poetry?
I started writing poetry when I was quite young. I can't remember exactly when. I was about 9 or something. I read a John Donne poem and I thought, I can do that. But of course I couldn't. I was shit. But I started writing then, and yeah, I guess it took a while for me to find my artistic voice. But yeah, I would say that kind of darkly humorous or profoundly humorous approach is common not just in my poetry but also in my prose as well.
Over the years, has there been many writers that have influenced your work very much?
Yes, I was very much influenced by E.L. James, 50 Shades of Grey. I quite no. I really there's a poet called an American poet called William Carlos Williams, and he was an Imagist poet. So he believed, his school of thought was that a poet's job was to create an image through their words, pick an object and recreate that image as evocatively as possible, and then leave it to the reader rather, to draw their own conclusions from it. So I'm very influenced by that, the power of an image by itself. So that's not what my poetry is per se, but I do borrow from that. And I also like, there's a Russian writer called Viktor Shklovsky, and he had this idea of writing, not just poetry, as a functional thing. And he believed that the job of any writer was to jolt people out of this kind of daze. We get into a lull when we live our daily lives. We just wake up, go to work, eat, and we don't really take a moment to savor those experiences. And he believed the job of the writer was to jar people awake from that daze and get them to really view their world in the profound sense that it does exist.
Do you feel that your writing does that?
I can't be too sure. I can only go by the feedback of other people. I think it does it for some people. Poetry is a very difficult medium. So by nature, you can only get so many people to be involved in it. But I hope it does. I think it does, because it has a different voice, I would say, which comes from my experiences of the world.
And you're a copywriter as well. Does that come into your work very often?
Copywriting doesn't come into it artistically, but in terms of the craft of writing, it does help, I suppose. It teaches you how to be more concise, how to convey your ideas with great specificity, so that you're not just saying, you're not using vague expressions to talk about something that's very complicated. It's important when you're dealing with complicated ideas, especially when they're metaphysical or philosophical, that you say exactly what you mean and nothing else. You leave no room for misunderstanding. And because of the nature of copywriting, it does improve your ability to do that, to be able to speak with clarity and precision.
We are going to put up a link to Timmy's blog, and I definitely recommend that you check out his poetry. What's your blog called?
It's called bodybard.blogspot.com.
Beautiful. We'll put up a link to that. Thank you so much for being on the show, Timmy. It's been a pleasure to have you, and we'll see you next week with the next episode.